Well, hello everybody. Sorry to interrupt your consumption here. If you're not familiar, I'm David Sweeten. I'm the chair of the Williamson Lectureship, and thank you. Uh, I'd like to direct that applause to all of you for coming and making this such an amazing event after 2 years of not being able to come back to campus here. So thank you. We're very pleased to have everyone here. Very pleased to see so many familiar faces. Very excited to have Jon Williams and Connie Willis and everyone here. So thank you all. We're going to proceed. I'm not going to talk at length because this isn't really about me. But to liven things up, I figured we'd intermingle in the lunch here a game. So all of your tables have a placard, a dry erase placard with a marker. This is your team's placard. We're going to play a little bit of trivia. And the winning table at the end of the lunch event will receive each a copy of Terraforming Earth. So I will go ahead and start us off with a few questions here to get us moving here. So if everyone at the table would designate someone to be the writer, also take note of your numbers for me. Okay. All right. Yes. All right. I'm going to jump randomly through my question list here. Some of these will probably be incredibly easy for you. Some of them will be weird and difficult. We'll find out. So we'll start off with something fun. In Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, what is it that Arthur Dent could never get the hang of? In Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, what is it that Arthur Dent could never get the hang of? Please write your answer on the other side of your board. And hold that up when you're ready. Okay. All right, I've got answers from some. Okay, last call for answers. All right, so the answer was Thursday. So those with Thursdays, hold your placards up and tell me your number again. 7, thank you. And there was another Thursday. Was it a Thursday there? 4? And I thought there was one more Thursday. What was the other Thursday? Nobody's going to claim their Thursday? All right, you got it. Okay, we'll jump into another one here. Which Connie Willis story involves a time-traveling historian preserving St. Paul's Cathedral during the Blitz? Which Connie Willis story involves a time-traveling historian preserving St. Paul's Cathedral during the Blitz? Okay. All right, seeing placards. All right, last call for placards. The answer is Firewatch. If you have Firewatch, keep them up. Thank you. Good. All right, what's this? Table 1 right here? Okay. Sorry, table 2? Table 3. Let's see, that's table 8. Thank you. And back there it's table 10, isn't it? All right, good deal. And table 11. Thank you. And back there is that table 13. Yeah. Thank you. Good job. All right. One more for right now here. In The Expanse, what name does Holden's crew give the Martian frigate they've captured? In The Expanse, what name does Holden's crew give the Martian frigate they captured? Good, good. Looking for placards, looking for placards. Going once, going twice. I think some people were just going for the gusto here. The answer is definitely not Enterprise. The answer, in a nod to Don Quixote, is the Roxanante. So we've got table 1, we've got table 3, we've got table 4, table 6, table 8, and table 7. Good deal. All right, we'll bring some more questions back in between things here. For now, what I'd like to do is to turn things over to Chancellor Patrice Caldwell to say a few words.
Homecomings at Eastern. One is in October for our alums, and the other one is right here. The Williamson Lectureship family has always been a wonderful opportunity for us to get together, remember Jack, and appreciate each other. So I appreciate each one of you who's here today, and especially our guests. I'd like to recognize Dr. Gamble is here, always a supporter of science fiction. Aren't you, Dr. Gamble? Thank you. And of course, our guest of honor and our mistress of ceremonies. So I remember the first time I heard the name Connie Willis. It was from Jack, who came back from Mile High Con and said, and I quote, "I met Connie Willis. We need to get her here." And that was all it took in those days. If Jack said, "We need to get her here," we called her and she came, and we were so glad. And then we just kept asking her and asking her and asking. And pretty soon she just came, and it was great. Then we made her mistress of ceremonies, so now she has to come to every lectureship, Connie, every one. Then I remember Walter Jon Williams coming with the Hugo that Jack couldn't collect because he had a fall, and I think he'd done something to his shoulder, probably broke it, but he was in his bathrobe, we were in his house, and you had the Hugo standing in front of the fireplace, and I'll just tell you that room was suffused with respect for him and affection. And it was just a wonderful experience. And I'd known Walter before that, but of course that endeared me forever in my heart and to everybody who knew Jack. I can't talk about science fiction without realizing and saying again that it is the quintessential genre of American culture. But having said that, the quintessential expression of it has to be Jack Williamson. He was raised on science fiction. He produced it and created it for 9 decades. And he never forgot the importance of the dangers of the future and also the promises of the future. And I think that is something that's unique to him, that he saw both sides, never forgot them. He was also a gracious host, a consummate intellectual, a generous teacher, and picked up the tab for more meals. And I know a lot of us are recipients of those meals. I'll just remember one incident when we were coming home from somewhere, parked in front of his garage, and he looked up and said, "Mars is right over my house." And I thought, of course it is. And you've already been there, haven't you? Because he had. He's been to Mars, and he took us all there. So thank you for being here, and thank you for letting me remember Jack and all of you in what we call our family affair, the Williamson Lectureship. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrice. So we will have another few questions here. This is round 2 of trivia. To get an idea of where things stand, there's a little bit of a heat here. Table 1 is in the lead now with 3 points. But we have a 3-way tie for second place with table 4, table 7, and table 8. And we also have some come-uppers in other tables around. Let's move on here to some other questions. Ahem. What film was inspired by Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? So the way this works, you're not supposed to yell out the answers for everybody else nearby to write them, right? Okay. All right. Good, good. I think I've been marking a lot of points this round. That's fair. All right. Of course, last call. Of course, the answer is Blade Runner. So we have table 1. We have table 2. We have table 3. Table 4. Is that 5 back there? Good. Table 6. Table 7. Good. Table 8. Table 9. Getting a point here. Great. Anybody else I missed? Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to throw shade. Sorry. And of course, table 13. Good job. Let's throw things in a little bit. What novel dictates 3 laws of robotics? What novel dictates 3 laws of robotics? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Going. All right. Of course, the answer is I, Robots. Wow. All right. Super from table 10. Okay. So we've got table 1. We've got table 2. We have table 4, table 6, and table 13. Just want to look in that direction. Table 7, table 8, table 9. Oh, that's a good one. All right, table 10. Oh no, I've got to break out a hard one now. Let's see, what do I have in front? Okay. What was the first winner of a Nebula Award for Best Novel? No Google. What was the first winner of the Nebula Award for Best Novel? What was the first novel? Not the author of the novel. Thank you for the clarification. Which novel, or phrasing, which novel won the first Nebula for Best Novel? Any answers? Okay, I've got a few. Going once, going twice. Of course, the answer is Dune. Table 2. Is that table 7 there, or table 8? Table 8, thank you. Table 8. I saw some others. I got table 2. Who else was it? Who else had Dune? Sorry, is that table 5? Good. And anybody I've missed that had Dune? All right. Last question before we move on to our next phase here. In William Gibson's novel Neuromancer, there's an artificial intelligence that is named Neuromancer. What is its sister artificial intelligence? What is the other artificial intelligence? In Neuromancer, there is an AI named Neuromancer. What is the other AI? Any answers? All right, going once, going twice. The answer is Wintermute. Wintermute. No winners there. All right. Okay, we'll mix it up a little bit more in a minute, but of course we're going to turn things over to what we're really here for our next two speakers. So I will turn things over to the ever illustrious Connie Willis.
Illustrious, that's me. So, okay. Before we start, we have a lot of people here and I want to introduce some of them. Thank you all for coming. It's so great to see everybody. I'm just so delighted that we got to do this in person this year. Doing it virtually last year was great, better than nothing, but it's so nice to just actually see human faces again. So whether or not you have your masks on. So, okay, so we have a lot of guests with us here. Dorinda Jones, you want to stand up? The award-winning New York Times bestselling author of paranormal romances such as the Dark Light trilogy, the Death and the Girl series, The Curse of the 10th Grave, well, The Curse of the 10th Grade is totally different, and A Hard Day for a Hangover. And probably, I'm pretty sure that you're the only person in this room that has an ice cream flavor named after her. So, you're right. Okay. Emily Ma Tippett. Do you have anything named after you, Emily? Okay. Okay. Under the name of E.M. Tippett, Emily has written Eventide, Someone Else's Fairy Tale, Paint Me True, and the Shattered Castle series. And under the name Emily Ma, Cryptoscience, which occurred, no? Okay, the middle of you were right, okay. But you also wrote Chasing Sunrise, yes, and Polar Shift? Okay, good. Okay, she's also the manager of Book Designs, which offers formatting, cover design, and editing services to authors and publishers. And obviously, she should have helped me edit that introduction. So, okay, Ian Tragelis. Ian is a physicist and a New Mexico author who's done research on radio galaxies as a physicist, and has written The Mechanical, The Rising, The Liberation, Something More Than Night, and The Bitter Seeds. Yes? Excellent. I'm gonna now be real nervous about all this. Okay, Reese Hogan. Reese, where are you? Reese Hogan is a New Mexico author, the writer of Shrouded Loyalties, Holding the Ashes, and The Deadliest Echo, and a content writer for the Writing Mastery Academy. And she does great work. Does great work here and there, and is a we need more writing mastery on everybody's part. So you're doing really important work there. So, okay, Jackie Kennedy. Okay, Jackie is the author of fantasy romance and paranormal romances, including Promised Queen, The Fiery Crown, and The Orchid Throne, and winner of the Romance Times Best Fantasy Romance of 2015 and the Frank Nelson Doubleday Memorial Award. Congratulations, wow. Okay, Sarah Nichols. Sarah, who writes as S.E. Burr, is the author of numerous middle grade fiction books and of Goblin Girl and Goblin Winter. She also writes academic books. Okay, the Bubonicon Troupe. You guys want to stand up? You don't want to admit who you are. Craig Kissinger, Jessica Coyle, and the rest of the Bubonicon group always come out from Albuquerque, and we really appreciate it. They put on one of the best science fiction conventions in the country and make it one of the most fun. This year it will be real, not virtual. Yes? Yes? No? Yes. And it's August 26th to the 28th, right? Yes. Okay. And if that changes, it changes. But you all need to be there. It's a chance for all of you to see each other again in very short order. Okay. Is Jean Bundy here today? Jean. Jean was the long time and now retired librarian of special collections, including the Jack Williamson collection, and has done such amazing work on collecting, protecting, archiving, and everything else for Jack Williamson's work. And with his better half, Jeannie, they have for many years put on a dinner for the lectureship. This year it's going to be at the president's house, but we really appreciate those wonderful dinners that you put on. So thank you very much to you and Okay, Steve Hefner, who I called David earlier. The editor and publisher of Hefner Books, which is celebrating its 25th anniversary. He's done collections of the works of Robert Bloch, Henry Kuttner, and of course Jack Williamson in the beautiful, what was it called, 75? That was a beautiful collection of Jack's work. So, okay, and then David Sweeten, poor thing. David is an assistant professor of English and graduate coordinator at ENMU. His specialty is in Middle English literature and Arthurian tradition, which fits right in with this crowd. And he's been this year's, has had the lectureship inflicted on him this year. That's the way to put it, I think. He also runs the Desperate Optimists, which is the writers group named in honor of Jack Williamson, who always called himself a desperate optimist. So, and then finally, I want to introduce 3 people who are important to me. The first one is my husband, Connie Willis, who you will see somewhere. There he is. He's a retired physics professor, an antique sewing machine and slide rule expert. Please do not give him any more sewing machines. Thank you. Really appreciate it. We're now into the millions in my basement. He's a quilter, and he's the person who gets me here and takes care of me through all of this, which I really, really appreciate. Could not even get to the door without him today. So, okay, and then finally, my 2 sisters, Patrice Caldwell and Betty Williamson. Patrice, as you know, is the chancellor of ENMU, and that has been the backbone of the leadership since as long as I remember. I don't know if it was from the very beginning, but almost the beginning. And she organized, planned it, and ran it for years and did such an amazing job that it's the reason that all of you are here today. Thanks to her efforts, the Williamson Lectureship is now one of the longest running named lectureships in higher education. And Patrice, Patrice taught English and science fiction with Jack, and they were a wonderful team, and she's a wonderful person to talk to, except that she has hummingbird tendencies, so it's hard to get her to light long enough so that you can actually have a conversation with her. But if you can, ask her about her teaching with Jack, because it was a wonderful experience, I think. And then my other sister, Betty Williamson, who was Jack's niece, and is still, we're still Jack's niece. And as many people have said, the glue that holds Roosevelt County together. She has helped with the lectureship for many, many years. She and her husband Mills used to put on a wonderful dinner at the ranch for everybody, and she has done, even for the years that it coincided with the Prairie Chicken Festival, and she had to do prairie chicken costumes and help with the lectureship at the same time. She once had 5 flat tires in the same week as the lectureship, I remember, and we saw her after her 5th. It was not pretty, but so. And when she was named the #1 volunteer of Roosevelt County, she did not go to the big banquet in her honor. She went instead to the cattle barren with us because she wanted to hang out with, as she called us so nicely, the riffraff of Roosevelt County. I have to explain one thing. The first time I met Betty and Patrice, I just fell in love with them and started referring them to them as my sisters, we had been separated at birth. And I did that from this podium until one year somebody at the luncheon came up to me afterwards and said, "That is such an interesting story. How did that happen? How did you get separated? And how did you happen to meet up again here at the lectureship?" And so then I stopped doing that. So they are my sisters in spirit. Got it? Everybody? Metaphorical sisters. Okay, thank you. Okay, so anyway, I do really want to welcome you all back to the real, actual, in-person Jack Williamson Lectureship. This is the 45th, right? I can't even believe that. When I wrote it down, I was like, that can't be right. And I'm just so pleased that we're here and not on Zoom today. So it just wasn't the same last year when we did it in Zoom land without dinner at the cattle barren and ice cream at the Dewdrop Inn and cinnamon toast at Mark's and trips to the library and the Jack Williamson collection and the thrift store downtown. How many of you have been to the thrift store so far already? Okay. Anybody who hasn't can go this afternoon before the panels or tomorrow after lunch. Okay. So I missed all of my kindred spirits, my sisters, and Jean Bundy and all the people who come to the lectureship. It got so bad with the pandemic that I even started missing the bad stuff. The speeding ticket that I got that time in Santa Rosa because I had a Colorado license plate and I was going probably 90. So, and getting lost on the way to Jack Williamson's house, even though it's only 8 blocks from the campus. Coming through the windstorms and the ice storms and the dust storms and the fog and the freezing drizzle and the road construction to get to Portales. And then when I found out Mark's had closed and that Goober McCool's had been turned into a marijuana dispensary, I thought we have to get back there before things fall completely apart. And here we are. And I'm really glad to see everybody. Before we go any farther, we do need to pay tribute to those of us who are no longer with us at the lectureship. Sadly, it seems like every year we have to say goodbye to somebody who's been a mainstay of the lectureship. In past years, we've had to say goodbye to Jack, to lectureship guests Ed Bryant and Gardner Dussois and Fred Cole and Vic Milan. We've said goodbye to lectureship mainstays Rick Hauptman and his wife Jean, and to Jack's brother Jim and his wife Nancy. And this year, we have to say goodbye to Betty Williamson's husband, Mills Bickley. He was a wonderful host, a faithful supporter of the lectureship. He made great old fashions and told terrible, terrible jokes. And we will miss him a lot. So, but in past years at the lectureship, both in person and virtual, I have done my best to fill people in on what's going on in the outside world, just in case they might have missed it. Lately, the news has been so just uniformly terrible that I don't blame people for just hiding under the covers and not watching what's going on at all. And the distressing thing to science fiction writers is that none of what has happened in the past, say, 10 years has been anything you could ever put into a science fiction novel, because your publisher would simply not believe it. They would say that is just too far out there for anyone to believe. So Putin invading Ukraine and then getting his head handed to him. Will Smith punching Chris Rock at the Oscars. That was not on my bingo card, I have to say. A geologist discovering a geo that looked like Cookie Monster. It really did look like Cookie Monster. And a container ship getting stuck sideways in the Suez Canal. Murder hornets and giant parachuting spiders and Star Trek's Captain James Kirk actually going into space. Nobody would believe any of these. I've also tried to fill people in on the cow news, given that the lectureship has had a theme, a running theme of cows and interactions with cows. I don't know why this is exactly. I know that Portales is in the Llano Estacado, and that means plain of steaks. And we have eaten all those steaks at the cattle fair, some of them chicken fried. And then there have been all those cattle ranchers who put their cows out by the side of the highway for the slaughterhouse to haul away. And that time that we had a really hot spell during the lectureship and one of the cows exploded, that was really cool. That was like a highlight of the lectureship that year. And then there was the time that Patrice Caldwell was taking lectureship guests back to Lubbock, and they saw a train hit a cattle truck, followed by a stampede of the cows that could still walk. And they were all heading straight for Patrice's car, and so was the truck driver. And he came over and said to Patrice, "Can I borrow your cell phone?" And Patrice said, "Sure," thinking that he was going to call 911. And instead he called his wife and said, "Hi, honey. Yeah, it happened again." So when I started looking for cattle news, I was afraid that it might be as bad as the news from Ukraine and Washington, D.C., but actually there was a lot of good cattle news. A cow escaped from a New York slaughterhouse and went wandering through Manhattan, strolling through Times Square, and obviously trying to decide which Broadway musical she wanted to see. Jersey Boys. I'm so sorry. I've been alone for the last 2 years. Or Cabaret. Or The Sound of Music. How's that? She was eventually apprehended, and I thought the story was going to have a bad ending, but they did not send her back to the slaughterhouse. She was sent to a farm to live out her life, her natural life, singing show tunes from Mamma Mia and My Fair Longhorn. I do apologize for that. I'm sorry. In other cow news, 12 artists in England banded together to create an 80-foot wide picture of a cow made entirely out of manure. So you guys here might consider doing that, if you have some spare time. And scientists have discovered that cows talk to each other through variations in the pitch and duration of their mooing, though it is still not clear what they say to each other. I mean, what are cows going to talk about? Hi, what you doing? I'm standing in the field. What are you doing? I'm standing in the field. What are you doing? I'm standing in the field. They have also discovered that cows make friends with each other and develop social networks. And I can only imagine what's next. Facebook for cows. And then dating apps. Gorgeous Guernsey seeks outdoorsy type. Vegans only. Brands okay, but no ear tags or obsessive salt lick licking. Must love meadows, buttercups, hay, cut chewing, home on the range, and field of dreams. The only cow news that I could find that was worse than dating apps was actually not bad news about cows. It was, as usual, bad news about human beings. 7% of Americans think that chocolate milk comes from brown cows. That is 16.4 million Americans. 48% don't have any idea where it comes from. 33% don't know that cheese is made from milk. And 20% don't know hamburgers are made from beef. And 56% don't know what the lectureship is. So this year, when I said I was going to the Jack Williamson Lectureship in Portales, this person I was talking to, this really happened, I am not making this up, said, New Mexico isn't near any water. And I said, no. And she said, well, you said it was a lectureship. No, I did not make that up. The lectureship, for those of you who don't know, was started in 1977 by Eastern New Mexico University in honor of Jack Williamson. And for those of you who don't know who Jack Williamson is, well, shame on you in the first place, but he was one of the forefathers of the science fiction field. He wrote groundbreaking stories from 1928 to 2005, writing through 2 centuries and 2 millennia, publishing his first story a year after Lindbergh flew the Atlantic and his last novel a year after the first rover landed on Mars. Writing the CT novels, the Legion of Space and Legion of Time novels, Darker Than You Think, which was one of the first SF novels to explore psychological issues, and With Folded Hands, one of the first novels to explore, years before Siri and Alexa and smart houses, the influence and consequences of robots in our society. He wrote about artificial intelligence, asteroids, antimatter, time travel, Shakespeare, werewolves, computers, comets, planetary colonization, underwater cities, authoritarian societies, and linguistics, and is the only science fiction writer to appear in the Oxford English Dictionary for having invented the words terraforming, androids, psionics, and genetic engineering. He not only wrote science fiction, he also invented the language with which the rest of us write science fiction. He wrote a comic strip, had an asteroid named after him, was on the cover of Newsweek, was an ardent proponent of science and critical thinking and of teaching science fiction in the schools, had a slow drawl and a courtly manner and a dry wit. He inspired countless writers and readers, Isaac Asimov, who wrote him a fan letter, and Ray Bradbury and Carl Sagan and Walter Jon Williams, and me. He was beloved by everybody who knew him for his kindness and generosity to writers all over the country, and writers from all over the country came to see him. Greg Bear, George R.R. Martin, Nancy Kress, Roger Zelazny, Carrie Vaughn, Jerry Purnell, Susie McKee Charnas, Edward Bryant, William Gibson, Nalo Hopkinson, Greg Benford, Fred Saberhagen. That's not even a complete list of all the people who've been here to visit Jack for the lectureship. And 7, count them, 7 grandmasters of science fiction, counting Jack. Fred Pohl, Robert Silverberg, Joe Haldeman, Harlan Ellison, James Gunn, yours truly, and of course Jack. I don't believe that any science fiction convention has ever managed to top that number of grandmasters at one convention. They were willing to trek to Portales just to see Jack, and we originally all came to see Jack, but we now come to remember and honor him and to carry on the work of science fiction that he loved so much. Jack once said something that I think is particularly appropriate for today. I know you have troubles, he had a person from the future say. So do we. Change always comes, turning past achievements into new problems, but most problems have solutions. Trust yourselves and find things will happen. We're depending on you to pave the way forward. Jack believed the future could be a better place and that science and science fiction were the key to that future. And we are all here as part of the ongoing tradition of making that happen. Thank you. Okay, this year's, we weren't inserting any more trivia questions. We gave up after that nobody knew the answer to that, was it? This year's guest of honor was the guest of honor at the convention in Helsinki in 2017. He's a longtime friend of the lectureship and was actually at the first one 45 years ago. I did not know that, Jim. Walter, good reason. He has been He remembers being asked over to Jack's house on that first occasion for drinks because Roosevelt County was dry in those days, and he has been at many lectureships since. He's also a Nebula Award-winning author with awards for Daddy's World and the Green Leopard Play, and Hugo and Nebula nominations for many of his other works. For a very long time, as I said yesterday, he was the Susan Lucci of science fiction. He'd been nominated 11 times and was the author everybody thought most deserved to have won and most underappreciated science fiction author, an honor in itself. Then he won, and then he became just another award-winning science fiction author. So he is the author of, and he is just as, his work is just as diverse as Jack's was. He's the author of This Is Not a Game, Deep State, City on Fire, the Dread Empire's Fall series, The Fourth Wall, the Praxis series, and the Quillifer series, among others. And it's hard to describe exactly what he writes because he writes so many different kinds of things: cyberpunk novels, near and far future SF adventures, swashbuckling nautical adventure novels, and The Rift, a disaster novel in which Walter Jon says, "I just basically pound a part of the planet down to bedrock," which seems singularly appropriate to our world situation right now. So he believes that science fiction writers have the gene for novelty and seem to enjoy a cascade of invention as much as writers enjoy providing one. And that is certainly true. He has provided for us, among other things, armored hover tanks, plasm, zombie vision, nano-assemblers, metropolises built in the shallows of the world's seas, crowdsourcing, alternate reality games, betas, blind jumps, brain uploads, dreaming sisters, the Praxis, the Shield, and Ronnie Romper suits. And it doesn't end there. He's written The New Jedi Order, Destiny's Way, a novel in the Star Wars Expanded Universe series, contributed a number of stories to George R. R. Martin's Wild Card series, written an episode for the Andromeda TV series, appeared in an episode of The Chronic Rift, and founded and runs the science fiction writers workshop, Tao's Toolbox, which sometimes includes encounters with bears. He's a scuba diver, a 5th degree black belt in Kempo karate, a world traveler, an expert on Herodotus, Heinlein, and why Casablanca is the greatest movie ever, a witty and intelligent conversationalist, and one of my favorite people, Walter Jon Williams.
Okay, so now I have to live up to that introduction, which is going to be quite a task. Since I've been sitting up here, several people have come up to me and said, "Sid, are you going to tell the airport story?" And I went, "Well, I told the airport story when I was here before." And then I realized that was 17 years ago. Many of you probably have not heard it. So although I had prepared a lengthy talk for you, it will now include the airport story, or at least what I can remember of it. But I'd like to open with an anecdote. This is something I'd forgotten until very recently. A friend related the story on Facebook. And I thought, hey, that sounds too much like me not to be true. So back in the summer of 1995, I was with a large number of colleagues attending a memorial for the author Roger Zelazny. Memorial held at the home of Joan and Fred Saberhagen. And Fred, of course, has since passed himself. And Neil Gaiman, who was a huge Zelazny fan, had flown in from out of state to attend. And at one point, he sort of looked around glumly and he said, "Oh, who's going to remember us when we're gone?" And my answer was Jack Williamson. Because at that time, it seemed perfectly plausible that Jack would outlive us all. He'd been around for all but a few years of the 20th century. He'd been a productive writer for nearly 70 years, and he wasn't slowing down at all. And I first met Jack sometime in the 70s when he was guest of honor at a science fiction convention in Denver. So of course I drove to Denver to attend the convention. And at that time I was trying to be a writer without any success. And I think I was still in college. And at the convention I attended several program items that featured Jack. And by purest chance, I found myself standing next to him as we waited in line for a table at the hotel restaurant. And he very kindly invited me to join him, and we had a long and pleasant conversation over dinner. I don't remember quite what we talked about. I have a horrible suspicion that we mostly talked about me. After which Jack picked up the check. So paying for dinner was Jack's second kindness of the evening. The first was that he took a wannabe writer seriously, although I assume not as seriously as the wannabe took himself. But Jack was, among many things, a teacher, and he knew how to encourage a young person, and I came away encouraged. The page missing. All right, well, so some years later, there was the first Jack Williamson lecture, and I drove out here with a party of Albuquerque writers, and we brought Jack a gift, which was a Pueblo storyteller figure, except that the storyteller was a mudhead and had lots of little mudheads sort of propped around him. And we thought that it sort of looked like an alien being overrun by lots of little aliens. And we thought that this was an appropriate gift for Jack. Maybe some of you have seen it because it was on his mantelpiece for many years. But that was 45 years ago, I guess, which puts a certain perspective on my life, which I don't like to contemplate. And, as Connie mentioned, in another act of kindness, Jack invited us to his house that evening and opened his liquor cabinet. And Portales was dry back then, so all this liquor had to go through the long, dangerous journey from Clovis. And so we had another pleasant hour or two, and Jack did most of the talking, fortunately this time, and told us stories about his life, colleagues, and career. He known people I never had a chance to meet, like Edmund Hamilton, Lee Brackett, Henry Kuttner, and he'd worked with every editor in the field and know most of the writers. So then he talked about rafting down the Mississippi with Edmund Hamilton and about meeting E. Hoffman Price, who, by the way, was an actual Taoist swordsman like you see in the movies, as well as being a West Point graduate. I don't know how all that fits together, but he was an interesting character. And Jack may have been already working on his autobiography, or thinking about it anyway, because some of the same anecdotes can be found there. And shortly after that meeting, I made my first sale and became a full-time writer. And I began to experience the same sorts of professional challenges that Jack had been facing for over 50 years. So let's take a look at Jack's amazing career. He wrote over 40 novels, either by himself or in collaboration, and over 20 collections of stories. And assuming an average of 10 stories per collection, well, that's a hell of a lot of stories. So in addition, he wrote an autobiography twice. He earned an MA, wrote a PhD dissertation about H.G. Wells, taught at ENMU for the better part of 40 years, wrote a newspaper comic strip, established a trust to fund El Portal, established the Jack Williamson Lecture Series, and traveled the world. And as Connie mentioned, he contributed to the English language by coining words like terraforming, android, and genetic engineering. And he remained relevant in a career that lasted 80 years. And in his last year, he published 3 different books. So when you have a career that lasts so many decades, you have to wonder how he managed it. And I think the answer may be found in the theme of this year's lectureship: never the same story twice. Jack sold his first story when he was barely out of his teens. Well, actually, he didn't sell it. It was appropriated from the slush pile by a rapacious editor and put in print without Jack's permission. But at least it did see print. And the thing that strikes me most about this is that nothing in his background prepared Jack for a career as a science fiction writer. He'd grown up on ranches and in small towns, and though the horizon is wide here on the Llano Estacado, Jack saw beyond it, into space, into the future, to new worlds, to alien beings and new unexplored concepts. So now we finally get to the Atlanta airport. Some years after that, the World Science Fiction Convention was in Atlanta, and I flew. And Jack was on the same plane, although we didn't see each other. But let me tell you what happens at the Atlanta airport. Okay, your plane comes up to the terminal, and this tube comes out, and you walk down the tube into the terminal, and then you go to a train station. And the train comes in, and the doors open, and you walk onto the train, and there's no driver on this train. It's all automated. And an automated voice comes on and tells you that the train's about to start, and please don't do anything dangerous. and you go all the way into the main terminal, you get off the train, you walk a bit, and then there's this huge lazy Susan, and your luggage starts spitting out from this underground passage, and you pick up your bags. And it was at that point when I was waiting for my luggage that I saw Jack Williamson across this lazy Susan from me. And I realized that this was the future that he'd been describing back in 1927. And there's also, the details were different, but basically he got the essence of it. And what he was also trying to tell us was that people have better things to do with their lives than carry their own bags. Or anyone else's bags. They have better things to do with their lives than drive a train back and forth over a little stretch of track. People have better things to do with their lives than take a Conestoga wagon to Atlanta from New Mexico. That's the possibility of this glittering future that Jack was seeing from what was essentially still, the horse and buggy days of his youth. Jack never lost his curiosity, which meant that he never lost his creativity. If you're a writer who's curious about things, you'll find things out. And you'll always find something new or different to write about. Jack never told the same story twice. He didn't have to. He was too interested in the next story. His curiosity never failed him. He never ceased to be interested in the world around him, in new science, in new places, in new people. But first, let's go back. Let me give you an idea of the world that Jack stepped into when he began to write for the pulps. For one thing, it wasn't a route to riches. The pulps usually paid half a cent a word. And in order to earn a basic living, you'd have to write maybe 20 finished pages per day. So how many people in this room could turn out 20 finished pages per day, day after day for years? If Bob Barnum were here, he'd be waving both hands. But I don't think anyone else. So it's not surprising that most pulp writers burned out. They'd last maybe 10 years, and then they'd find another better paying occupation. And so because of that, we lost a lot of good writers to other jobs, basically. And what Jack Williamson did was he also found some other things to do with his life. He served in the military, he went to college, he got his degree, he taught at a university. He wrote a comic strip, for which I think he was very well compensated. He could write novels after the Second World War, for which he was also paid far better than he would have been in the pulp magazines. During and after the Second World War, there was a huge explosion of paperback books. Prior to the war, paperbacks were considered bottom of the barrel markets, the penny dreadfuls. But during the war, there was a big effort to get books to the soldiers. And they needed portable, lightweight books. And so the best writers in the country contributed to these anthologies. Some of them are still in print today. The Essential Dorothy Parker, The Essential Ernest Hemingway. So they're still there. These are the exact same editions that our soldiers carried across the world. And what happened then is that made paperbacks respectable, and they provided an opportunity for pulp writers both to republish their old work and to get new work in front of the public. So it became a lot easier to earn a living at this. And Jack evolved, which is what writers do, or are supposed to do. He never lost his curiosity. He always found new things to write about. And he became an inspiration to an enthusiastic but clueless college student who was trying to figure out how the writing business worked. And although I read science fiction most of my entire life, I came to writing it by roundabout means. I never intended to write science fiction. For the simple reason that I didn't think I was good enough. I'd grown up reading all of these titans in the field, and I didn't think I could measure up. So I tried writing in every other genre that I liked to read. I tried mysteries, I tried literary fiction, I tried historical fiction. And after some years of trying, it was the historical fiction that sold. Suddenly I was a pro. So I had fun writing historical fiction, which was all set on ships during the American Revolution and the War of 1812. But there were limitations to the genre insofar as each book was about 200 men on a small ship. It was a struggle to get women into the story, and for that matter, to get off the ships. So just to exercise a part of the brain that had been dormant, I wrote a science fiction proposal that was the opposite of everything that I've been doing. It had a female protagonist, a woman of color, by the way, on an alien world and on dry land. And I enjoyed the writing. I sent the proposal to my agent and then forgot about it and went back to writing historical fiction. And then the sales of historical fiction collapsed very suddenly. And just as I was starting to look at the help wanted sections of the paper, the science fiction proposal sold. And suddenly I had a new career that I had never intended for myself. And by sheer luck, I stumbled into the right career for me. A lot of my proposals in other genres had been rejected for being too weird. And in science fiction, that's not so much of a handicap. But when I looked at the sort of science fiction that I wanted to write, I had a hard time finding an answer because I kind of liked everything. So I decided to turn that into a virtue. If science fiction is a candy store, stocking everything from bonbons to jujubes to truffles, I was going to become the best candy chef in the kitchen. I was going to write everything I liked, and what I liked was everything. Never the same story twice. That might as well have been my motto. This puzzled people at the beginning. I was referred to as a chameleon writer. I don't think I was a chameleon. I was a person who had far too many writers in his head, and they were all coming up with stories. I wanted to actually enjoy my career. If I'd been more concerned with building a career, I might have tried to hit the same note more often. My first novel to attract any kind of public attention was Hardwired. It was my 8th novel, but because a lot of people thought it was my first because they hadn't heard of the first 7. And if I'd had any kind of commercial sense, I would have followed that novel with Hardwired 2, and then Hardwired 3, and Hardwired 4, and so on. And along about Hardwired 6, I'd have noticed that my audience had got bored and moved on, and that my career had crashed into the dust along with my self-respect. So I'm lucky that I chose the path that I did. I never got stale, and I never got bored. So if you pick up one of my books and you don't care for it, it doesn't matter. Pick up another book because it will be different and you might like it. Never the same story twice. So now that I've had a career that's a little more than half as long as Jack's, I'd like to think again about my answer to Neil Gaiman's question at Roger Zelazny's memorial. Whoever talks about us after we're gone, they're going to be a part of this culture that has brought us here today. And Jack Williamson was a part of that culture. And in fact, through his work, his curiosity, his generosity, and his vision, he helped to create. Being remembered by people whose worldview was in part created by Jack Williamson would be an honor, as is the fact that I can stand here today as an element of this globe-spanning science fiction culture. We are all part of the same dream, and I hope the dream goes on forever. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. And again, can we have another hand for Walter